strong country needs a strong state resting on a constitution respected by all politicians. No one will violate the Constitution as long as I am here.
After more than 2 years of political uncertainty, Lebanon welcomes its new president. But will a new leader bring in change, or will it be more of the same? Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. For 2 years, Lebanon has been stuck. No president, no parliamentary elections, and a looming refugee and unemployment crisis plaguing the small Middle Eastern nation. But now there is a new president. Will he bring about major change? Here now to explain Lebanon's current situation and what the future looks like, CCTV's Yumna Nofal joins us from Beirut. And Yumna, Lebanon has greeted its new president, Michel Aoun, after more than 2 years without one. Why has the government left this vacancy unfilled for so long?
Well, Anan, that's a pretty good question, because for the last 2 years and a half, the simple answer is that the parliament, the members of parliament that vote for a president in Lebanon, because we have to remember that Lebanon elects a president in an indirect way. It's members of parliament that get to elect a president that serves for a six-year term. Now, up until October 31st, which is when Michel Aoun was elected, the members of parliament could not agree on a candidate to nominate before they could even elect. So the way it works is that usually the president, with the person who gets to be president, gets the majority of the votes, and all members of parliament must be present. But members of parliament from different political parties, opposing political parties, couldn't agree on a candidate. The reasons being they couldn't agree on issues like the Syrian refugee crisis, the economy, the Syrian war. And basically what ended up happening is, at the end, I think Lebanon had reached a tipping point, and what used to be formal rivals, which is the former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, the head of the Future movement, and Michel Aoun, the head of the Free Patriotic movement, and which is also an important Christian figure, finally got together after years of differing on different issues and said, well, Hariri pledged to vote for Aoun if Aoun accepted to nominate Hariri as a prime minister designate, and that's exactly what happened. Today, Saad Hariri is prime minister designate. He's forming a government, and that is basically what ended the political vacuum. Now, we have to remember that Lebanon went through 15 years of civil war, and at the end of the civil war in 1990, all Lebanese officials that had just ended the war met in Ta'if in Saudi Arabia and agreed on what is called the Ta'if Agreement, which basically stipulates that the Prime Minister of Lebanon must be Sunni, the Speaker of Parliament Shia, and the President a Maronite Christian. And the reason was they wanted to make sure, because Lebanon is a multi-religious country, and they wanted to make sure that something like the Civil War could never happen again. And that's exactly what ended up finishing the vacuum.
Right, and Yumna, this comes at a time when the country is facing a very high unemployment rate. There's also a growing refugee crisis. People from Syria continue to spill across the borders. What's the outlook?
Well, after a 2-year-and-a-half vacuum, the outlook right now is looking pretty positive. I mean, the Lebanese people are hopeful, even the officials are hopeful. As I told you, it reached a tipping point. I mean, we are currently facing an extremely dangerous refugee crisis, just because Lebanon has the highest refugee per capita, in any country in the world. 1 in every 3 people is a refugee in this country. And so the president, in his first speech as president, said and pledged that he would make sure that the Syrian refugee would return home safely, but that poses a big problem because a lot of the refugees fled, not also because a lot of them are anti-regime, anti-Bashar al-Assad, which is the president of Syria, and they fear that if they come back, they'll be captured, executed. So it poses a big problem. But on another scale, in terms of the economy, in terms of foreign investments, in terms of tourism, we're hopeful that hopefully it will pick up now that there is stability, now that the regional powers also in the Middle East seem to want Lebanon to be the stable field when all countries around it seem to lack that.
Thanks, Yumna. That's CCTV correspondent Yumna Nofal talking to us from Beirut. Joining us now, Edmund Garib is a scholar and specialist in media issues and Middle East affairs. From Beirut, Halim Shibaya is a Lebanese journalist, and he teaches at the School of Arts and Sciences at the Lebanese American University. Also from Beirut, Spira Azkul is the U.S. National Coordinator for the Free Patriotic Movement Party in Lebanon. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Edmund, let me start with you. So we've had about 2 years, more than 2 years of political deadlock.
2.5 almost.
2.5 years of political deadlock in Lebanon. Now something of a breakthrough, if we could call it that. Lebanon has a president. How significant is this? Is this a time for change?
I think there is time for change, there is a need for change, but the question of whether we are going to see change, that's something else, and we can talk a little bit more about it later. But there is no doubt that this is a significant development. I mean, Lebanon has been without a president for about 2.5 years. The issue has become almost a joke. More recently, there was here a Lebanese film director, very well known. People, after they talked about his film, they were asking him about the election. And he said the Lebanese have elected a president in Brazil before they elected one in Lebanon, referring to Michel Aoun, who is of Lebanese origin, but he's a Brazilian. But this has been, it's become a joke to a certain extent. But this is a very important sign. It's an important development. It's going to help resolve some of the issues, at least in terms of perhaps questions such as appointments for diplomatic posts, especially ambassadors. Lebanon has maybe about 80 embassies around the world. Maybe there are only 10 ambassadors. The rest are chargés d'affaires, other senior officials within the government. There is a great deal of corruption. Maybe they might be able to make some changes there. There are also issues that deal with the day-to-day life, questions of water, electricity, garbage collection. This has been another big
There's
scandal.
been a garbage crisis in Lebanon.
Exactly. So maybe we might be able to get some of these issues dealt with, but I think the bigger issues, whether it is the reform of the electoral system, whether it's bringing balance again to the political institutions, there's still a lot of problems. If President Aoun can help rebuild the institutions of the state or begin to rebuild the institutions of the state, that will be an important step forward.
Well, let's bring in Halim in Beirut. And Halim, what kind of reaction has there been in Lebanon to the election of Michel Aoun as president?
Well, as the guest has already mentioned, in terms of having a president, because we didn't have a president, that's a good development. On the other hand, we can perhaps note that there was a good reaction from supporters of General Aoun and supporters of the main political parties, because it seems that there was an agreement between the different political parties on the presidency and other issues. However, perhaps there is also a portion of the Lebanese population who is very skeptical and cynical about the current political rulers, because according to them, and I support this view, we've had the same politicians for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years even, and so in that sense, President Aoun will really have to deliver to that portion of the population who are very skeptical that anything good can come from those political parties who have been ruling us, so to speak, since the 90s.
Edmund, what do you make of Michel Aoun's support base? Where does it come from? Is it mainly Christians? Because he actually signed this alliance with Hezbollah in 2006 as well.
That's a great question. I mean, General Aoun basically is a Lebanese nationalist. Yes, he's a Christian. He has had a great deal of support from Christian community in Lebanon, especially in Mount Lebanon. But he also has had support from the Sunni Muslims, from the Shiite Muslims as well. And this goes back to the time when he was the commander of the Lebanese army, when he tried to challenge the violence that was taking place in the country at that time. He was trying to overcome some of the foreign forces that had moved into Lebanon. And interestingly enough, at that time, he was opposed to the Syrian government, very much opposed to Syria and to the regime of Hafiz al-Assad. At the same time, however, also the US was supporting at that time the groups that were opposed to Aoun. So ultimately, Aoun was the prime minister and as a caretaker president in a way, you can say. But ultimately was defeated by the military intervention of Syrian, Palestinian, and Lebanese resistance forces, and he was forced to flee to Lebanon. And then he returned, and he was trying to make arrangements. He was always aspired to become president again, but he wasn't able to do it, and he shifted alliances since the 2006 or so. He signed an accord with Hezbollah, and they have been allies since that time. However, I don't think he would have been elected had it not been at least with approval from other parties, other groups in Lebanon. Because had that had not happened, I don't think Michel Aoun would have been elected president, because he had tried. So basically he does have some Sunni support. He has support from Hezbollah. He has support also from a number of Christian groups and parties.
Support from Iran as well?
Of course. When we're talking about support from Hezbollah, absolutely support from Iran.
Okay, let's go back to Halim. Halim, what are, in your view, what are the challenges, the big challenges that Michel Aoun faces right now? And how does he prioritize that? You know, we just heard Edmund tell us a moment ago about the whole wide variety of challenges that he possibly faces. Things that nuts and bolt issues like, you know, providing electricity and water, etc. Then there's, you know, the issues of unemployment, the refugee crisis, and then the bigger issues of reforming the political system. So how does he prioritize all of these?
I think Edmund already touched upon the issue of corruption. And President Aoun himself had mentioned that he wants to fight corruption in the state. And so this is one big issue, because as we know, corruption is deeply embedded in Lebanon. So this will be, obviously, everybody will support him if he's able to really carry out an anti-corruption agenda. So this will be one big challenge for him. A second challenge for him will be more in terms of foreign policy. In terms of how will he be able to navigate these different alliances he has. So as Edmund already mentioned, he has an alliance with Hezbollah, which is now 10 years old. He has a new understanding or agreement with Lebanese forces, Samir Jaja, since January, and a 2-month-old agreement with incumbent Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri. So in terms of the foreign policy challenges, we know that we have a war in Syria, we have the divide between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So how will he be able to navigate this issue? Till now, I think he has been able to do it successfully. I read his oath when he was sworn in as president. I read his statements so far. He is trying to kind of to navigate and not to say anything that will be too controversial to any group. And I think this will be a very important thing for his success. And a third element I will say is that in relation to refugees, the Free Patriotic Movement till now has had a lot of critics in terms of how it has dealt with the refugees and the rhetoric about the refugees. Now, I don't know in terms of, I'm not accusing them of being, I mean, I don't know what the official party line now is, but I think there will be a point where they will need to come up with a policy that will really provide a good solution for refugees, and trying to steer away as much as possible from an anti-refugee rhetoric and kind of scaring people from refugees. So I think that will be also very important. And I think in these three issues, if he's able to deliver, I think there will be more than enough on his plate to be able to navigate them. Okay,
Spiro is able to join us now. Spiro, you are from the Free Patriotic Movement. You are the US National Coordinator there. What is your feeling on Michel Aoun being elected president? Is this an inflection point for Lebanon? Are we going to see lots of change now?
Well, obviously, you know, we're very happy to have General Aoun as president, elected president. We're looking forward to the next 6 years. We have a lot of work to do. We really have an immense reconstruction agenda coming up, mostly on internal issues, also on external and regional issues. So this is the culmination of 25, 28 years of political struggle, and we finally have General Aoun and his program and what he represents and stands for in a position to actually have change in Lebanon. Most of our issues that I think we're facing are internal issues as opposed to just external and regional issues. Starting with corruption, we have problems with electricity, we have problems with trash collection, we have massive economical problems, a massive refugee problem in Lebanon. So we're really looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and addressing these issues in an effective way and start joining the world community and being a country with...
Spiro, how difficult is it going to be for Michel Aoun to implement his program? You know, as our reporter told us at the beginning of the show, Lebanon has a very unique system where you have the top leaders in government, president, prime minister, and the speaker coming from different religious backgrounds. Given that, how hard is it going to be for him to achieve consensus?
Look, I think the very fact that he's president today is already a type of consensus. There's been a consensus that brought him into power between all major parties that you just mentioned. It's not going to be easy. We are going to be fighting against an established corrupt system that's been around for decades. It's been sponsored by foreign powers, by international powers. We have systemized corruption, institutionalized problems across all types of ministries. All of these issues are politicized, so every ministry is going to be part of this or that party. So resolving these seemingly everyday basic issues would potentially become political problems based on the division of these ministries across these different party lines. It's not going to be an easy job, but I think there's a renewed sense of energy in the country. There's a sense that we have something that's happened that hasn't happened in the last 15, 20 years. I think we do have an opportunity. Everybody feels that we have an opportunity to change and have implement things that have not been implemented for a while.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. Coming up, Lebanon is holding its next parliamentary elections in 2017. What's ahead for Lebanon's political future? Plus, is the sectarian power-sharing government still viable for Lebanon? Our panel will weigh in on that. Stay with us, you're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about Lebanon's political future. The country just appointed a new president after more than 2 years without one. Let's get back to our panel. Edwin, let me start with you again. The process that led to Michel Aoun becoming president was, as we've just pointed out, 2.5 years with no president. I guess the breakthrough came when the Sunni leader, Said Hariri, threw in his support behind Michel Aoun. What led to that? Why did he suddenly support Michel Aoun?
Well, I think there are a lot of changes. First of all, there is a recognition that the economic situation was deteriorating so rapidly and everybody is going to be affected by it. Also, Hariri said that he didn't have the money anymore that he used to have, and he therefore needs to work with the others. I think there's also a recognition by the different parties. They wanted to keep the regional players who wanted to keep Lebanon a little bit away from the conflicts that the region is witnessing, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Yemen, where we are seeing, for example, this confrontation between Iran and Saudi Arabia taking place. So to a certain extent, there are some important development, and this is the point that you mentioned earlier when you talked about consensus. I don't think General Aoun would have been elected had there not been consensus among not only the domestic players, but the regional players as well. And recently, there have been some good signs of that. A Saudi delegation has visited, led by Prince Khalid Al Faisal, who is the Emir of Mecca. And apparently, he extended an invitation to the new Lebanese president, to General Aoun, to visit Saudi Arabia. That's a significant step. Perhaps, although we have to wait and see, we might see the beginning of some kind of dialogue, or I wouldn't want to call it reconciliation, but agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia that might influence their supporters on the Lebanese front to at least begin some dialogue. And maybe if it succeeds, ultimately it might contribute to some dialogue between the Iranians and the Saudis, although I have to wait and see.
Right, Halim, looking at success or failure, can President Michel Aoun get the Lebanese people on board? Is he a unifying figure?
So, at the moment, as Edmund mentioned, he does come with a broad coalition from various communities in Lebanon. And this is at the level of the political parties. And so he does have a unique position because of his very strong alliance with Hezbollah and his new alignments or understandings with Hariri and Jaja. However, as a unifying figure, he still has his critics, as is normal with all politicians in Lebanon. And I think it all depends on how he's going to perform, what he's going to do, what he's going to say, and the success of, as we mentioned before, his anti-corruption program, and showing the Lebanese public that things are going to be better on a day-to-day basis in terms of electricity, water, the garbage, and also combating corruption in the state institutions, and bringing back kind of trust in Lebanon for foreign investments. So there's a lot on his shoulders, but at this moment he's been called the father of everybody, Bay al-Kil, which I think, to judge it with good intentions, I think it's meant perhaps that he wants to reach out to all Lebanese. But on the other hand as well, there are a lot of Lebanese who say what we need is really state institutions, anti-corruption, transparency, accountability on all levels of the government, and also seeing deliverables on a day-to-day level.
Right, Spira, I'm wondering among the Lebanese people how much has changed, because if we look at just last year, August 2015, there was a big demonstration in Lebanon by Free Patriotic Movement supporters who were protesting what they said was the marginalization of Christian rights in Lebanon. Has that changed?
I think that the election of General Aoun today can constitute a change towards curbing that feeling. I think that Christians finally feel that they have a chance at equal representation by having a strong Christian president sitting next to a strong Sunni prime minister and a strong Shia parliament leader. You know, Christians, the FPM and Christians in general have maintained over the last, I'd have to say 10 years, that we haven't had a strong Christian figure in a position of power, which is the presidency in our system, representing the rights of Christians, and that extends across multiple ministries, multiple institutions, in jobs, in representation in terms of army officers, and so forth. So I feel that the advent of General Aoun as president has changed this feeling, and we have to see now how the execution of all of these programs that should level the playing field between all these different sects in Lebanon should make all groups, not just the Christians, the Sunnis, the Shias, and the Christians, feel like they have an equal partnership in this country. It's the only way that Lebanon can function, and that can be translated into day-to-day things that you could feel every day in your everyday life in Lebanon.
Edmund, I want to get to one foreign policy issue, and that is the Syrian crisis, which looms very large in this neighborhood. What is the relationship between Michel Aoun and Bashar al-Assad?
Apparently it's a good relationship. I don't think that's something that has been there for a long time, but I think the situation, there's been there was even talk that Bashar al-Assad may even go to Lebanon to congratulate General Aoun, but I don't think that was a realistic thing. I think it was floated. But the problem is going to be not here. Lebanon is going to be in a very difficult situation because there are supporters of the opposition in Lebanon, and they are strong, they are influential, but there are also supporters of the regime with Hezbollah and other forces on the ground. And so I think if he can at least try to minimize the interventions by these different Lebanese forces inside the Syrian conflict, then this would be a step forward. However, I don't think Lebanon has much influence. It doesn't have much clout, and neither does General Aoun to influence the situation inside what's going on in Syria.
Right. Halim, I mentioned earlier on that President Aoun has the support of Hezbollah. What does Hezbollah want out of this?
Well, the critics of the paper of agreement that was signed in February of 2006 between Hezbollah and the Free Patriotic Movement of General Aoun, they were saying that what General Aoun was doing was giving Hezbollah a Christian cover for maintaining their arms, their weapons basically, and currently for their involvement in Syria. So there is an element of truth to that, because Hezbollah did gain a lot from having the largest Christian party, and still arguably it is the largest Christian party, that is having an alliance with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, obviously, you know, the subject of its weapons in Lebanon is a matter of discord and divide. A lot of voices here want Hezbollah to hand over its weapons. Hezbollah doesn't think that this is the right time. So it's a controversial issue. So definitely Hezbollah has won from its alliance with General Aoun, and specifically now with getting him to the presidency, so to speak, Hezbollah has shown that the alliances it makes on the internal level, it kind of delivers. So on the level of the Christian, perhaps, supporters of General Aoun, President Aoun now, I think they have a lot of good feelings towards Hezbollah, because they feel that they contributed to General Aoun becoming a president. So I think it's a win-win situation on both sides. On some issues for President Aoun, I think it did lose him some of his perhaps supporters who weren't very happy with the agreement, but that's an issue obviously for debate.
Edmund?
Basically what I wanted to say is that I think one of the main things that General Aoun, if he can accomplish that, I don't think the issue of control by the state over the weapons is going to happen anytime soon, before the Syrian conflict ends. But I think if he can begin to deliver on the social issues, the water, the electricity, taking care of the people, making the appointments, if he can begin to deal with the economic issues, opening Lebanon again for investment, improves Lebanon's relations with the neighbors, and signs, there's one of the reasons may have been also for this appointment, is that Lebanon needed to sign some agreements dealing with the question of oil in the Mediterranean, because right now there's cooperation between Israel and Cyprus over oil, that Lebanon also has part of that oil field. So that was something that was extremely important, that pushed the different parties to sign. So I think he has a chance. I don't think he's going to be able to eliminate corruption or undermine the confessional system.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. Chat with us about this or any other show on Twitter. We're at CCTV_America. We also use Facebook. Find us at facebook.com/CCTV America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.